Good morning, everyone across the state. Welcome to Closing the Gap webinar presentation. And thank you for being with us here this morning. My name is Desiree Soto, and I am the Northern Field Services Administrator here at the Child Development Division. And with me is my colleague, Greg Hudson, who will be fielding and providing responses to any questions that you may have. If you look up at the top right-hand bar, you'll see a Q&A. In case your Q&A happens to be minimized, if you click on that, you should get a box that opens up at the bottom there on the bottom right. If you have a particular question, you can email in or send it in, and you'll receive either a response directly back to you, or if it's something that generally will help everyone, Greg will reply to the entire group. So again, we're going to get started. I want to say that this webinar will be posted for 90 days on the CDE's website, and that link for where it'll be posted will be sent out on our listserv in the next couple of days once we do have it posted. So we're thinking that it'll be good information for programs to have for future reference, and knowing that, again, it's 10 o'clock in the morning and teachers are in classrooms and people have busy schedules with their meeting schedules and so forth, and so some may be wanting to access this information other than this particular hour, so it's being recorded. So again, the name of the webinar is Closing the Gap Using DRDP Results for Classroom and Program Planning. And I will say that recently I was at a conference and provided these presentation slides and had some wonderful interactions with the audience, and realized the timing is really perfect for providing this overview and some tips and hints and things that we're seeing here at the department and sharing that across the state. So this PowerPoint presentation was done recently in October, and I'm ready to just share it with all of you. So I hope you find it helpful. So let's see, I'm going to click that. Didn't work. The arrow. I'll click on this one.
Click on the link first.
There we go. Thank you. So the end of today is, first of all, I'm going to just give you the big overview of our desired results system, provide some context, some background. Sometimes folks are saying, wow, there's so much out there. How does it all fit together? And so hopefully by the end of today, that some of that will be more clear for you. And then I want to focus on two particular pieces of that system. One is using the DRDP data at the classroom level, and this is where there can be significant gain for our children, right at the classroom level. And then the last half of the presentation, these are about 50-50, is combining the data to make the big picture. So the target audience here really is many of you out there in our programs, teachers, site supervisors, and program directors. And even if I am talking specifically to teachers, we know that it takes a team. So we need a site supervisor and program director to help support teachers in their work. And when we're talking about the big picture and program goals, it's important that that information is also communicated to teachers. So it's a group of you who are going to support making a difference with our children in terms of outcomes. So here is a graphic that we've used for quite some time that I find helpful to just start the presentation, where we're looking at our desired results system. And so, of course, starting at the very center, it's all about our children. So ask contractors to look at individual child progress, and then, of course, groups of children. But it starts with the child, and that's a DRDP assessment in terms of looking at their development and planning for gains in that way. The next circle, the yellow circle, says family goals. So it's important in our system that we're including our families, and we do that by way of parent conferencing and sharing with them what's happening with their children in the classroom, and it's a two-way street, so they have an opportunity to share with our teachers what's happening with the children in their home setting. And, of course, at the program level, we have parent surveys that you're looking at and asking families, how can we better support you in your needs in our program? And plans based on that input. The green circle is our classroom and family child care home environments, and that's an important piece of the system that we're looking at. And, of course, the environment rating scales is the assessment that's used for to look really intentionally at the environment and make a plan for improvement. And then the blue circle in the outside there is the program, and it's important at the program level that our contractors are looking at successes that have occurred, what's going on, what's taking place in our programs, what are we doing well, and then where can we make better gains and provide better services for our children and families. So given that big picture, we're going to step back now and start at the classroom level, and just as you all know that the DRDPs are completed twice a year for each child at 60 days after enrollment and again after 6 months, and then there's a summary of that classroom data where teachers are looking for trends and what that tells them about the children's development, and they're making a plan to support their learning and development. And this graphic basically is a slide in a graphic form, and you'll see something very similar in our curriculum frameworks that, in the upper right here, we're starting with our observing our children and the environment and the interactions, and over time gathering information about that, what that tells us about children's development, what they're showing us, they know, and we're completing assessments, the second box there on the right side. Then summarizing the assessments, analyzing and reflecting on that data, and planning and modifying the curriculum environment are especially highlighted here because over time this is an area where we continue to notice there is a gap, and that's part of the reason that this is titled Closing the Gap. So that we're highlighting this in this presentation so this gap is closed and that teachers and programs aren't going directly from completing assessments to implementing a curriculum and environment without some thoughtful, intentional planning based on what the assessments show us. So these gray boxed areas are ones that really we've identified as a gap and would like to really call out in this presentation today. And then, of course, up at the top, implement the curriculum, the environment changes, again, observe the children, and you just continue the cycle of assess, summarize, analyze, and plan once again. So it is a cycle, it's ongoing. And then I wanted to also provide for you when field services consultants are coming out to monitor, either provide technical assistance or monitor, the instrument has the child development instrument that is used when we do site visits, has a specific item, desired results, profile, and data. And it says this: the program maintains the DRDP 2010 and uses the information to plan and conduct age and developmentally appropriate activities. And so, again, this is the message that we want to give today, is that teachers are able to explain and show how they're using information to plan and conduct activities in the classroom. Because there will be a conversation in classroom with a teacher where we're saying, we may look at an activity plan and say, I see that you're doing this today. Tell me how this relates to the DRDP data. Or why is it that you've planned this particular activity today? And those kind of questions. And we would like that teachers are able to talk about that. I think it takes practice, and that site supervisors and program directors can help teachers practice that conversation about how they're using the information and how they're intentionally planning activities for their children. So the first gray boxed area that we looked at on the graphic was about summarizing DRDP data. And that can be done in a variety of ways, and so not telling you that you have to do anything specific, although DRDP Tech is out there. We also have, you can see a website address down below where there are all kinds of resources, some of them being Excel files that data can be, from the DRDPs can be put into those Excel files. We've, in the past, back in years past when I'm in the classroom, have actually hand tallied the DRDPs so that we can look at what the data tells us and look for trends in our classroom. I would say that it is the development division's high priority to wherever we can find ways to help teachers and programs have time savers, because we know there is a heavy workload, and DRDP Tech and some of the applications that are being developed and provided for contractors, just some of the work that we're trying to do in order to support teachers in their work and summarizing data and doing some analysis. So again, there's a resource, a website here, and then at the end of the presentation on one of the slides, there's another website for DRDP Tech that you will want to explore. And so, again, some screenshots of various reports that might come from DRDP Tech. Some of you have your own databases that provide summaries, but it's important for a classroom teacher to look at, group summary data and make a plan based on what that's telling her. And of course, for those of you who are data people, this is really fun because you can pull the data apart in a lot of different ways and look at it in multiple ways and make a plan for your classroom. So that graphic that we wanted to really focus on was analyzing and reflecting on the data. So the classroom teacher should be looking for trends. Now, we have in the past on forms and so forth called them key findings, and we've heard that that may be confusing for a teacher. What is a key finding? It also sounds kind of a deficit approach, as if it's like not a good thing to have a finding. But what we're really saying with that phrase, a key finding, is that we want you to look at the data at the classroom level and look for some developmental trends at the domain level. So what am I seeing? What does it tell me about the children in my classroom today? And then make a plan. So create a group summary is the key here. Identify a trend. And we did say on the previous slide by domain, and sometimes we have found that teachers, and even at the program level, plans are being built around a specific measure. And so we know that children's learning is integrated, and so planning and focusing on a measure is simply discrete to be effective. And so what we're asking is that teachers in classrooms and programs are looking at their data at the domain level and providing then a plan based on what they're seeing. We recognize that, language and literacy is big. It has a lot. There are many measures within that particular domain, and so there may be some measures within the domain that you've noticed could use more support or attention to help increase the gains overall in language and literacy. And so it may be that there are many action steps that are developed to support the domain of language and literacy. And they may, it may be that vocabulary building and some of the specific measures may be called out, but overall the developmental trend when you're looking at group data should be identified at the domain level. We'll get into the action steps in a little bit. And so to help teachers look at data, summarize it, analyze it, and then that information down on paper, we've provided this form, the 4001B, and it's not a requirement. There are programs across the state who have their own forms and own way of asking teachers to write down what they're finding and creating some steps and who's going to go take care of making sure in the next upcoming months, that the action steps are going to be implemented. And so, although it's not a requirement, this is a form that is provided on the our Results Training and Technical Assistance website, and as well as CDE's website, for your use to help write things out. However, you can use whatever works well for you. Again, across the gray bar on the left-hand side, it currently says findings from developmental profile. We'll probably be modifying that language or expanding it so that it's very clear to the classroom teacher what we mean by a key finding. And also there are accompanying instructions with this form, so that's helpful as well. The action steps, you can see, do have specific prompts within that gray box to help the teacher think that through. And the other thing I wanted to call out for you is that this form is formatted very similarly to the form that is required in the Program Action Plan, the PSE, and that form is the 4001A. And so last year, I think, at this time, we had asked contractors, can you please send in a sampling of just pick 3 classrooms and send in a sampling of this 4001B, and so that we have kind of get a pulse of what's happening with the form and what kinds of strategies are being used and so forth. And what we found was that there was the confusion. There were program directors completing this 4001B rather than a classroom teacher. The action steps looked like they were more at the program level. For instance, training will be provided on such and such. And so what we really want to emphasize is that this particular form is for the teacher to lay out what she's found and put some steps in place for what they would like to do right within their classroom. So here are some ideas about, kind of big buckets for thinking about action steps, that they should include both indoor and outdoor planned learning opportunities. So based on your DRDP data, that there are some specific things that a teacher may want to make sure is happening indoors and or outdoors. The action steps could include interactions and strategies to support the development of the key findings. So it may be that if it's vocabulary building, that there's an intentional effort on teachers' part to have sustained conversations back and forth with young children, and that becomes a focus and is noted in the action steps. Of course, it's important to look at environments and the materials that are provided so that when children are participating in open choice and choosing however they would like to engage in the materials there in the classroom and family child care home environment, that it's rich and that it's going to meet the developmental needs of the children in the program. And of course, include families in this action step conversation where teachers can inform families about what's going to happen in the classroom and how you can help at home, and again, working in partnership with them so that everybody's on the same page and fully informed. Again, action steps or further action steps really identify new approaches and modifications or changes in the environment or program, and not just be more of the same, and reflect the teacher's sphere of influence. So sometimes what we hear from teachers or what we read when we receive information here in the office is that it's the same type of action step as last year and probably the year before. It's rather generic. And so we're asking that teachers are thinking about, okay, what am I currently doing? And based on the DRDP data, it shows that I really need to be intentional and focused on this particular domain, let's say mathematics. And so what else can I do? I'm already doing X, Y, and Z, so how can I build on that? How can I extend it? How can I do more of it and or something different that complements it? But it's not just more of the same. And so I had a conversation recently with a teacher who said, we have new children, and so these children are coming in and they haven't, so why wouldn't it be the same action steps, because it's mathematics, and so we really want to focus on that domain, and why wouldn't it be the same? And so, in response to that, I would say that, it could be that last year for mathematics, that part of the action steps were to develop a schedule to rotate your materials and make sure that, weekly, someone will be in charge of making sure there are math activities and materials in all parts of the classroom environment, and that gets rotated. Well, it should become really part of your system, part of what, after you've focused on that for a year, you should have that in place, and that should be automatic, and so you should continue to do that. But what we're saying is, so that's in place, so now what else can you do? There's always something, it's ongoing improvement. There are always new things that people are learning from their colleagues, the classroom teacher next door, from trainings and research and so forth. And so that's what we're asking, is that teachers are thoughtful about building on past practice, and it just be more of the same. And certainly reflecting on the teacher's sphere of influence is important, because we're not asking for this piece of reflection and action step development to be requesting from their program director on something or purchasing of something, but it's within my own sphere of influence here in the classroom. What can I do to affect change so I can get things out of the shed, I can rotate it in, and look at our classroom schedules, and there are a variety of things that the action plan should reflect that the teacher can actually implement, the teaching team and parents. And so here is basically a sample of a summary of findings at the classroom level. You've got a domain that's identified with multiple action steps. One of the things that we may also do is take out all these lines in here to make the form easier for you. But the point of the lines was to show that one key finding really needs many different types of action steps to support it, so that there will be change in that particular area of learning. So that was the point of all the lines, but they may go just to make the completion of the form actually easier. So this is a good time, actually, when you're thinking about your action steps. It's like, okay, well, where are my children going to be at the end of the year? What am I shooting for here? What's the trajectory? So this may be a time when contractors, when teachers actually are looking at the preschool and the infant toddler learning and development foundations to say, where are my children going? It's a roadmap for you. So then you have that good idea, then you're looking at your frameworks, because in the framework are all kinds of ideas for how to enhance your environment, build on the children's play, look at the materials, and think about teacher-guided learning activities. Again, it's rich with ideas and information. It's a starting point for you to brainstorm. The framework has strategies that are developmentally appropriate, of course, reflective of thoughtful observation and intentional planning, and that's what we're wanting teachers to do. The strategies are individually and culturally meaningful, and of course inclusive of children with disabilities and other special needs. So a good resource for teachers when they're thinking about what action steps do I want to include in my action plan. So now we've looked at the summarizing of assessments and the analyzing of the data, and we're going to move on to plan and modifying the curriculum and the environment. And so those action steps that were developed really help support the development of the activity plans. Meant to help teachers, because now you've done the work of being creative and thinking about, a variety of things that you can do to support learning. And so now it's a matter of taking that information that you've brainstormed and over the coming months include that in your activity plans. And this is where there's a really nice connection between what you're doing daily with children in the classroom and why you're doing it. And if you're going backwards, you're looking at your action steps, and the reason you have this information here is because you've identified a key finding or a trend in your classroom that you really want to focus on. Doesn't mean that you, in addition to that, you're of course providing across activities that support learning across all domains. And so this is more or less a summary slide of planning and modifying. So the first bullet shows that we've started with summarizing the data, they analyzed it and reflected on it, and they've thought about how to address individual, small group, and classroom level goals based on that data at the domain level. And then the action steps identify how the curriculum and environment will change. And this is an ongoing, of course, process over the coming months. As children grow and progress, there may be modifications to the activity plans and new ideas, but your structure of where you're going with your curriculum and environment changes and so forth already have been drafted out in your action plan. And then after 6, you're completing the DRDPs again, and basically it's a time for celebration. So you've probably noted where children are and a change based on what you've done. You may look at your action steps and say, next year I can do more here, or next year I wouldn't need to do that, or I've changed or modified my action steps. So it's a reflection, and it's good learning for the classroom teachers as they think about moving on next year. And so now we're coming back to this overall system graphic once again, and we're going to take a look at the program level, the blue circle, and it's a very similar process in terms of looking at data and planning for children, but it's at the program level. And I will say that the program self-evaluation that's due June 1st to us really should include, and you don't have to submit to us, but it includes also the parent survey data information that you have, and that programs are reflecting on that and making a plan, as well as the environment rating scale. You're rolling up data and looking at that summary of findings and making a plan as well. Even though that information doesn't come into the Department of Education, what does come in is the information about the DRDP and the action plan that you've created around that. So once again, here's what's in our instrument when our field services consultants are thinking about and referring to it as they do a on-site review. So it says the program has developed and implemented an annual evaluation plan that addresses any areas identified during the self-evaluation as needing improvement. And so there needs to be some analysis and some thinking and a plan that's made. So for the last couple of years and going forward for next year, the program self-evaluation is intended to focus on the DRDP piece of the entire DR system. And so really it's looking at the children's developmental profiles rolled up at the program level. So that's what we're going to focus on next, is combining the data to create really a big picture. So after the 6-month assessment period, DRDP is rolled up to create a big picture of what can be done to support improvement in a particular domain or a particular area in the following upcoming year. So again, you're looking at trends in the DRDP data, big roll-up data. It's not specific. It's not about individual children. It's not about individual classrooms. It's that data then that is rolled up. And when programs are looking at that, they're saying, okay, here's an area that we'd like to focus on. At the domain, again, not the measure level. It's too discrete. and, of course, making an action plan based on what you're seeing. We had contractors say, directors say, well, God, after year, we have the same key finding. It continues to be language and literacy. And so I am uncomfortable when I go to my board and present, once again, this is our key finding. And so what I say and what others have said, this occurred in the presentation that was done recently, was that it is time to say what already has occurred. So we focused on language and literacy, and here were some things that we did, and we made progress, and teachers learned this, and this is what occurred in our program. And going forward, here are some other ways that we're going to support this particular domain. Because we've heard also from directors that you can't put everything that you may want into a one-year action plan. And so you're going to, since it may be ongoing, more than 1 year you're focusing on language and literacy, you may think about, well, what is a 3-year plan for this? What am I going to do this year to affect change? What am I going to do next year? And it's okay, I guess, that you have the same key findings each year. Because after all, you're coming into your program are coming from basically the same community. So if your focus is about English language learners and supporting that, it may continually each year, it may continue to be your focus for a program action plan. Again, there are a variety of things that can be met and identified in your action steps. So you could consider your pedagogical approaches, your professional development, although you may have a completely separate or cohesive professional development plan that would include part of this, but you'll be thinking how to support your teachers. You're going to want to look at curriculum, the materials that are required. You may look at your staff or your program schedules. How are we running our programs to be are they most effectively run in this particular way? Certainly child-staff interactions are key. What can you do to support that? You may look at your use of space in your classrooms and do some kind of inventory or analysis of that. Of course, parent and family involvement and informing them, and community outreach. So there's a wide range of things that we want program administrators to think about as they're mapping out their action steps. And again, this is what is helpful for teachers. They need your support and can't do some things on their own. They're in their own classroom environment, and so now this is the important part where program administrators are providing them with resources and training and analysis of what's happening in the program in order to affect change at the program level. So this is the 4001A. It is required at this time to be submitted in your program self-evaluation, where we would like to see the DRDP, your summary of findings, and what your action plan is. So this is the A form, not to be confused with the B, and is typically done at program director level, but of course then shared out and with site supervisors and teachers and the board and all stakeholders in your community. So there's again a goal, a finding, and a goal. What do I want to do to support children in terms of their education? What is the domain that I really would like to focus on, and the action steps that I want to complete? Then, of course, who's going to do it, and I think this is really important. That who's going to actually be responsible, and approximately when it'll be done. We did have feedback that the completion date also was something we may modify, because at the classroom level as well, it may feel as if something action step is completed, then it's like cross that off, it's over and done, as opposed to it being ongoing. So we want to make sure that something is implemented and continues to be implemented, and it's not a one-shot deal. So here's just, again, a whole bunch of different examples for language and for language and literacy, for instance. And so it may be that you want to make sure that your teaching staff get an introduction specifically to some of the foundations, so they have an understanding about children's growth and development and where they're going, and the companion curriculum framework chapters. Of course, some programs specifically and would want to think about their English learners and how they're going to engage them in their learning experiences. And at the end of this long slide, I wrote specifics. So, you know, these are kind of generic slides out here, and contractors will probably want to put their own specifics when they're thinking about this. This might just be too generic. But certainly, whenever you're focusing, for instance, even on mathematics, you want to have that lens of, okay, we do have English learners in our program, and how are we going to support their learning in terms of mathematics or whatever domain you've selected. Teaching staff, you could select a specific strategy. This mentions dialogic reading. You may want to do a training on something very specific, so teachers have that across your district or across your program as a strategy. And then, of course, there's always the follow-up to facilitate, to ensure that the training actually is implemented so that it's not a one-shot deal. Teachers go away and say, that was really great, but then when programs, directors or site supervisors go into a classroom, the implementation isn't there. And so we want to make sure that in an action plan that you think about, so how am I going to know if this worked? What's the follow-on to this? And so that's what this particular bullet is here. Involving families and parent education in whatever the key finding is. Could be quarterly meetings and resources and so forth, and ensuring that children with disabilities and other special needs have adequate support to engage in language and literacy activities. So then, certain lenses that you want to have to make sure all children in your program have access to the training and materials and so on. Some examples of what might be in an action plan would be a program-wide look at the classroom schedules. So looking to make sure that there's really ample time for children to explore their interest areas. And so with this particular focus or key finding, it was language and literacy. So making sure that it's not a lot of transitions in your schedule, so children aren't able to really get into the rich environment and the materials that are provided for the children. And of course, thinking about your outdoor time and looking at the classroom schedules and making sure that whatever your focus is, that it's also included in your outdoor playtime. For example, you can do an inventory. Now, a classroom teacher could do this on her own, so she knows what she has available, but in terms of a purchase district-wide or determining, maybe there's resources at a particular site and fewer at another, and how to get those materials moved around in and out of sheds and so forth. But looking at inventory is important, or one strategy. And of course, just what are your community resources and how can they be pulled into your program to support the action plan. And so remember that the action plan is a living document, that you've identified certain activities that you're going to be doing in the upcoming year, and who's actually responsible for each of those. And so you want to go back and either check them off or make a note about how that was changed or modified, or we didn't get to this, or we did this and it was better. But it is a living document. It's something that you should be look at and planning from, along with other things, of course. And then at the end of that action plan cycle, that you're reflecting back on what you did. So you're looking at each action step that you said you were going to do, and what was the outcome? Did it work? Didn't it work? What did the teacher say about how something was implemented? And what was the feedback from them? What, were they successful, and how were they successful? If you do again, how would you do it differently if there were modifications to the action steps? That kind of reflection. We did add into the program self-evaluation a reflections page this last year, the CD 3900, which is just really an open box where you can write a narrative about reflecting back on the action steps that were implemented the previous year. And I know the field services consultants and Greg and I have read all of these, and the reflections are just fabulous. I think that some of the most exciting reading that we've had here in the office coming in from the program directors and contractors have come in through these reflection pages. There is no right or wrong on this. A reflection is being thoughtful about what's occurred and just really documenting that, doing some thinking about it, critical thinking, and putting that down on paper so that you can learn and grow and from based on what you did last year and where you're going to go next year. And so, again, it's some of them have flat out said, oh my gosh, I put down so many action steps that I thought it was going to be completed, for December going forward, and it was just overload for the teaching staff. And so we did 2 of them, and we're now absorbing and implementing. And so what great learning. And that's just the exact kind of reflection that we want from contractors. And so thinking about how you're planning, what you want to do, and how it went, and how you're going to do next year. So thank you for all your reflections on your program action plan. And so really a nice little simple slide here. So whether we're talking to teachers at the classroom level, site supervisors, program level, you basically are asking yourself 3 questions. So where are you now? So looking at DRDP assessments, that data is going to tell you, here's where I am. And where are you trying to go? So I'm thinking the foundations, they're going to tell you where, for our young children, where are they going? And that little roadmap on their development, their trajectories are in the foundations. And then how can I get there? So the plan is how? What are my action steps? Again, this is our framework saying, here are some ideas. And so for you to be thoughtful and intentional about how I'm getting to where my goal is. So here are a list of resources and websites that may be helpful for you that I probably referenced throughout the web today, and some contact information at the bottom. Your child development services consultants is if you don't have your assignment, it's listed at that link. I think that many of you have had back and forth conversations with your field services consultants over the last several months, June, July, August, September, October, about your program self-evaluations. And so I think that some of this information that we've just gone through today is good foundational information, gives you kind of the big structure, and now you're going to be able to continue with those individual conversations about your program self-evals with your field services consultants. So Greg's been really typing. I've heard his little keyboard over here clicking away. So before we close, I'm going to ask Greg if you have any questions that have come in that you think need clarification.
A couple people have asked where they can get copies of the slides, and I've typed in that they will be available online. If you have any more information about that, that would be helpful.
Okay, and I actually don't know if able to hear you. Oh, it's this right here.
Yes, they
We
can.
probably heard you. So, yes, and we said also in the very beginning, some might not have been on yet. The next couple of days, once we have this presentation posted on our website, we'll send out the link to where you can access that through our listserv. So the same way that you found out about this webinar, you'll find out where it's being posted. Anything other than that?
No.
We appreciate that you logged in today and listened, and hope that you found it helpful. And if you have any other questions, feel free to contact your field services consultant. So thank you very much.